He also ignores the fact, which I supplied in our email interview, that Progressive Dad was suspended from Twitter for mocking an actual far-right extremist. Oh, you're gonna leave that out, Holt, huh? Oh, yeah, you're not a propagandist. You're a journalist, Jared Holt. Sure. Wow. Jared Holt, you scheming little sleazy rat. Antifa in mainstream media and Twitter. This is part 5 of a miniseries. There are links below to parts 1 through 4 if you need them. June 19th, the Daily Caller published Lenahan's opinion piece, headlined, "If the Columbia Journalism Review has any integrity, they will retract their article smearing me," in which he writes that the chairman of the Columbia Journalism Review is the editor-in-chief of Reuters. Interesting. Well, I fact-checked this, and it seems it's true according to the Columbia Journalism Review itself. His name is Stephen J. Adler. Lenahan writes that the Columbia Journalism Review, quote, "is considered an arbiter of ethics in the journalism profession," unquote, and therefore, quote, "that means it's important for them to adhere to those same high standards in material published under its auspices. In a piece published last week by Right-Wing Watch researcher Jared Holt, they did not," unquote. He then goes on to point out the inaccurate and misleading, to put it lightly, nature of Holt's article, some of which I have already pointed out. He continues, quote, "The errors in his piece are substantial, and his decision to disregard relevant information that I told him myself adds up to defamation with substantial professional and personal consequences. Since the publication of the piece, I have been subjected to harassment and my livelihood is under threat. Therefore, I am calling on the CJR to retract the article. I asked the journal for a retraction, and here is the reply I received from Kyle Pope, their publisher and editor-in-chief. Dr. Lenahan, thanks for writing. We are going to decline your request to retract the piece. If, however, you would like to write a letter for publication outlining your grievances, we'll happily consider it. Thanks, Kyle Pope." Let's go through all the reasons why the CJR's piece should be retracted. Now, just so you know, folks, we aren't going to go through all the reasons. We're not going to read this whole article, but you can if you want to. See that link below. Lenahan continues, quote, "In his opening paragraph, Holt states that I, Eoin Lenahan, am a, quote, far-right social media user, unquote, and, quote, an established right-wing troll, unquote. He states definitively that I am not an online extremism researcher and that I have, quote, no affiliation with any previously known organization that researches extremism, unquote. He even claims that I'm using my research as a cover for the supposed reality that I am a far-right figure." That is a major claim for the CJR to put into print. Holt is referring to my satirical channel, Progressive Dad TV, which aimed at puncturing online outrage culture using humor. Joe Rogan, among many liberals, was a fan of the account, and this write-up from PJ Media last year points out that the account poked fun at outrage merchants from across the political spectrum equally. Holt doesn't have to find it funny, but he does need to provide evidence when he accuses it of being far-right, unquote. Need I point out here how ludicrous it is that Holt is conflating a character that Lenahan plays on Twitter with Lenahan himself. It's a bit silly. Lenahan continues, quote, "The likely source of Holt's accusation is It's Going Down, a revolutionary anarchist news outlet which I linked to several journalists in my Quillette piece. It's Going Down also provided no evidence that Prog Dad was far right, not a single tweet or Instagram post." He is here referring to the It's Going Down piece that I mentioned earlier in this series, and you can see that yourself by seeing the link. Lenahan continues, but not only does Holt take them as a credible source, he even parrots their narrative, almost verbatim. In this piece, It's Going Down stated that I am a, quote, well-known racist far-right troll who has now rebranded as an online extremism expert, unquote. As if to prove my initial thesis about journalists and Antifa connections correct, Holt has used an anarchist Antifa mouthpiece as a reliable source. For me being right-wing. You also see this. Oh, folks, if you don't engage with these people, this might come as a surprise to you, but this is how they are. They, in trying to deny that they are Antifa, they demonstrate that they are Antifa. Anyway, he continues, he also ignores the fact, which I supplied in our email interview, that Progressive Dad was suspended from Twitter for mocking an actual far-right extremist. Oh, you're gonna leave that out, Holt, huh? Oh, yeah, you're not a propagandist. You're a journalist, Jared Holt. Sure. Wow. Jared Holt, you scheming little sleazy rat. Wow. All right. Lenahan continues, I'd specifically asked Holt to mention this fact should he talk about my suspension. Tisk tisk. Contrary to Holt's claims, I've been involved in studying online extremism since 2016 when, after a lengthy and competitive interview process, I was asked by Tony Blair's Faith Foundation to produce a series of curriculum documents that focus on providing interventions for youths at risk of drifting into online extremism. And at this point in the article, they link to this article right here. You can see that if you want to. Further on, he writes that he explained this to Holt in the interview he conducted as a preparation for his article. He ignored it and instead perpetuated Antifa-led conspiracy theories about my professional integrity. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Jared Holt, how do you sleep at night? How do you live with yourself? Lenahan continues, and CGR published them as fact. Holt did not follow up on any of my responses before publishing. More concerning, his editor at CGR further peddled these conspiracy theories on Twitter, posting a number of defamatory and mocking tweets, and you can see these right here. We're not going to read these in the interest of time, but of course you know how to see those. He continues, in our interview I provided a detailed breakdown of the methods of my study. Holt again, through incompetence or malice, completely oversimplifies that method in paragraph 6 of his article. He says, quote, Lenahan tells CGR via email that his methodology consisted of labeling Twitter users as, quote, highly connected, unquote, to Antifa if they had, quote, 8 or more connections, unquote, on Twitter to either accounts run by anti-fascist activists or one professor at the University of Hong Kong, unquote. Holt is trying to imply that the individuals in our data set were connected to 8 random Antifa accounts on Twitter. This is not the method I explained to him in response to his questions. Importantly, Holt's attempt to minimize the significance of the in-group connection demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how networks are mapped. The actual methodology goes far beyond that, as laid out in this recent article by Quillette. Later in his piece, Holt quotes Ellen Gallagher, who states, quote, we can only really say that journalists who report on the far right follow anti-fascist accounts on Twitter, which is really not a groundbreaking revelation, unquote. My point exactly. Network mapping is only a first step. I myself was at pains to point that out in the Quillette article to Gallagher herself on Twitter and to Holt in the email interview. Oh, yeah. So does that mean that they're just so stupid they read that and they just sort of glossed over and said, I don't know what they're talking about, I'm going to ignore that? Or did they understand when he said that and they chose to deceive their readers? Tisk, tisk, tisk. He continues, our data merely provided us with a list of individuals who have demonstrated a conscious and strong in-group preference in our Antifa dataset. 15 of these accounts were verified journalists. In a second step, we manually turned to their body of written work for evidence of critical references to Antifa. We couldn't find a single case. Holt and Gallagher have continued to ignore this part of our study. Gee, I wonder why. So what do you think, folks? Ignorance or malice or some mixture, and at what ratio? Now, this is a good part, folks. The most embarrassing part of Holt's criticism of our method is his mention of, quote, a professor at the University of Hong Kong, unquote. He claims that this random professor was one of our seed accounts. In my interview with Holt, I clearly mentioned Mark Bray, author of, quote, Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook, twice. I would bet my left arm that Jared Holt knows exactly who Mark Bray, the author of this book, is. He knows. I mean, they're comrades. Sure, Jared Holt doesn't know who Mark Bray is. Lenahan continues, there is indeed a professor at Hong Kong called Mark Bray, but Holt got the wrong Mark Bray. And I'm sure it was an honest mistake. He has included an error so egregious that it can only be surmised that he did not read my interview or read the second tweet in the very thread that started all this, in which Lenahan referenced, quote, Mark Bray, who chose not to confirm if he is a member of Antifa, but whose book makes a solid case for inclusion, unquote. Or this tweet in the thread. How much more clear could he possibly have made this? Jared Holt, he made that very clear. You know it. We know it. We know that you know it. You're not fooling anyone. You know exactly who he's talking about, you lying scumbag. No, I didn't know you meant that, Mark Bray. Yeah, he's probably your friend. He's probably your comrade, okay? And you're just covering for him. Bullshit, you didn't know which Mark Bray's talking about. Mark Bray, the author of the Antifa Handbook, comes up immediately on Google. Or else, if he did, he intentionally published false information. Either way, this, surely, cannot be how CGR intends to become the, quote, intellectual leader in the rapidly changing world of journalism, unquote. CGR have now simply changed the wording, quote, a professor from Hong Kong, unquote, to, quote, a lecturer at Dartmouth University, unquote, without mentioning anything about the error. or the Antifa Handbook. This is the end of part 5. Part 6 is done and will be uploaded in a couple of days after this video is uploaded. Part 6 may be the last episode of this series depending on your input in the comments section of part 6. You'll see what I mean when you see it. See the link to our BitChute channel and subscribe to us there, and click that little bell icon because YouTube is purging itself of all content creators like ourselves. And thank you very much for watching. Liberty, strength, honor, honesty, justice, truth, and love.